On October 26, 1909, the most powerful man in Japan stepped off a train at Harbin Station in Manchuria. His name was Ito Hirobumi. He was 70 years old. He had served as Japan's prime minister 4 times. He had written Japan's constitution. He had negotiated the treaties that turned Japan from a feudal kingdom into a modern empire. He was meeting with a Russian official to discuss Manchuria. As he walked along the platform, reviewing a row of Russian honor guards, 3 shots rang out. The shooter was a Korean man named Ahn Jung-geun. Ito Hirobumi died 30 minutes later. Ahn Jung-geun was executed the following year. In Korea, Ahn Jung-geun is a national hero, one of the most celebrated figures in modern Korean history. In Japan, Ito Hirobumi is on the 1,000-yen note. Same man, same moment. 2 completely opposite verdicts. How does one person produce 2 such contradictory legacies? To answer that, you have to understand who Ito Hirobumi actually was. Ito Hirobumi was born in 1841 in Yamaguchi Prefecture, then called Choshu Domain, into a low-ranking samurai family that had only recently been elevated from peasant status. Japan in 1841 was still a closed country. Foreigners were almost entirely excluded. The Tokugawa shogunate had ruled Japan for over 2 centuries on a policy of deliberate isolation. That world was about to end. In 1853, American Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with a fleet of steam-powered warships, the famous Black Ships, and demanded Japan open its ports. The shogunate, faced with military technology it couldn't match, agreed. The opening of Japan triggered a political crisis. The Tokugawa system, built on stability and exclusion, began to collapse. Samurai across the country debated what to do. In Choshu, a faction of young radicals concluded that Japan needed to modernize, to learn from the West, build Western-style industries and militaries, and push the old system out of power. The young Ito aligned himself with this faction. In 1863, he did something that was technically illegal and potentially fatal. He slipped out of Japan on a ship and traveled to Britain. He was 22 years old. He couldn't speak English. He had never been anywhere. He was gone for 5 months, and what he saw changed him permanently. In 1868, the Tokugawa shogunate fell. The Emperor Meiji was restored to nominal power, and a new government took control. Largely driven by the young reformers from Choshu and the neighboring Satsuma domain, Ito was part of this founding generation. He was 27 years old when the Meiji Restoration happened. He would spend the next 4 decades helping to build what Japan became. His particular role was institutions. While other leaders focused on military reform or industrialization, Ito was drawn to the question of how a modern state was supposed to be organized. What kind of government? What laws? What relationship between the emperor and the people? In 1882, the Meiji government sent Ito to Europe to study Western constitutions. He spent a year in Germany and Austria, studying with some of Europe's leading legal scholars, particularly examining the Prussian model. He came back and spent the next several years drafting what became the Meiji Constitution of 1889. It was not a liberal document by Western standards. The emperor retained enormous formal powers. The parliament had limited authority, but it was a constitution, a legally defined structure of government, and it gave Japan a framework that other Asian powers had not managed to build. In 1885, Ito became Japan's first prime minister under the new cabinet system. He would serve 4 terms total. He was, by almost any measure, the single most important figure in building Meiji Japan. But the internal reforms were only half of the challenge. When Perry had forced Japan to open its ports, the resulting treaties were deeply unequal. Foreign nationals in Japan were subject to their own country's laws, not Japanese law, a system called extraterritoriality. Japan couldn't set its own import tariffs. The treaties locked Japan into a subordinate position it found deeply humiliating. One of Ito's central projects, shared across multiple prime ministerships and foreign ministers, was renegotiating these treaties to put Japan on an equal legal footing with Western powers. This took decades. It required Japan to demonstrate, to the satisfaction of Western governments, that its legal system was modern enough to be trusted. The 1889 Constitution was partly a message to the West. Japan had a rule of law. Japan had a legal system. Japan deserved equal treatment. By 1894, Japan had renegotiated the treaties. By 1902, Britain, the premier world power of the era, had signed a formal alliance with Japan, treating it as an equal partner. For the generation that had lived through Perry's arrival, this was nothing short of a transformation. But here's the other thing that was happening simultaneously. Japan's modernization project was not only internal, it was strategic. The Meiji leadership, Ito included, believed that Japan's security required controlling the strategic approaches to the Japanese islands. Korea, positioned between Japan and the Asian continent, was the most important of these. China had historically dominated Korea as a tributary state. Japan needed to change this. The Sino-Japanese War of 1894-1895 accomplished it. Japan defeated China, and the resulting treaty recognized Korean independence, meaning, in practice, the end of Chinese protection. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905 accomplished the next step. Japan defeated Russia, the other major power with influence on the peninsula, and established a Japanese protectorate over Korea. After this war, Ito was appointed the first resident general of Korea, the effective governor of the country. He is remembered in Korea primarily from this period. Ito's approach to Korea was, by his own account, an attempt at gradual guidance, Japanese management of Korean affairs, while nominally preserving Korean institutions. He did not initially support full annexation, which some Japanese factions were pushing. But what Korean society experienced was the systematic dismantling of its sovereignty. Korean officials were replaced. The Korean military was dissolved. Japanese control over Korea's foreign relations was total. Whether Ito believed he was acting benevolently or simply pragmatically, the effect was the elimination of Korean independence. Ahn Jung-geun was a Korean independence activist who had been operating in Manchuria, organizing Korean resistance to Japanese rule. On October 26, 1909, he traveled to Harbin Station with a handgun. Ito had recently resigned as resident general and was on a diplomatic trip. The meeting at Harbin was about Manchurian affairs, not about Korea specifically. But to Ahn Jung-geun, Ito represented everything Japan had done to Korea. He had a list of 15 crimes he attributed to Ito specifically, which he recited during his trial. The killing of the Korean Empress, Myeongseong, the forcing of unequal treaties on Korea, the annexation policies. He shot Ito 3 times on the platform. Ito died 30 minutes later. Ahn was captured immediately. He was tried by a Japanese court in Port Arthur, Lushun, found guilty, and executed in March 1910. During the trial, he conducted himself with complete composure. He said he considered himself a soldier fighting for Korean independence, not a criminal. Japan annexed Korea formally 6 months after the assassination. Ahn Jung-geun's image hangs in the waiting room of Harbin Station today, though the Chinese government periodically takes it down under Japanese diplomatic pressure, and then quietly puts it back. A memorial hall was built in the station in 2014. In Korea, there are Ahn Jung-geun memorial halls, statues, and his image appears in textbooks. He is held alongside figures like Admiral Yi Sun-sin as a hero of Korean resistance. Ito Hirobumi appears on the Japanese 1,000-yen note, a position reserved for cultural figures of historical significance. His legacy in Japan is primarily as the architect of modern Japan's constitutional and institutional framework. Both assessments are accurate and incomplete. Ito was genuinely central to Japan's transformation into a modern state. He was also the primary administrative architect of Japan's control over Korea. Ahn Jung-geun was a political assassin operating outside any legal framework. He was also fighting against a process that stripped his country of its sovereignty. The question of how to hold both of these things simultaneously is not one that has been resolved. Not between Japan and Korea, and not within either country's national memory. Ito Hirobumi lived at one of the rare hinge moments in history, when the choices of individuals could actually shape the trajectory of nations. He made choices that built Japan into a modern state, and that simultaneously contributed to the end of Korean independence. The historical reality is that these two things were not contradictory in his mind. The Meiji generation genuinely believed that Japan's security required Korean subordination, and that Japan's form of modernization was exportable to other Asian countries, whether those countries wanted it or not. This belief was not unique to Japan. European empires operated on similar logic. What made Japan's case distinctive was speed. In the space of 50 years, Japan went from forced opening by a foreign power to itself becoming an empire, replicating the pattern of the powers that had threatened it. Ito Hirobumi was at the center of that transformation, start to finish. A Korean nationalist's bullet ended his life. Both men were trying to determine what the 20th century would look like for Asia. The 20th century answered in ways that neither of them could have anticipated. This is the Dragon Throne. We cover the architects, assassins, and accidental heroes of Asia. The ones history needs to hold in both hands. Subscribe if this story made you think. New episodes every week.